After the Second Great War, the world was forever changed, now dominated by two different factions, divided on an economic system represented by red and blue. And speaking of in America, in 1948, Thomas Dewey very narrowly won the election in one of the closest elections in American history, on a strong pro civil rights, anti communist stance, becoming the 34th president in American history and the fifth from New York, with Howard Stanton becoming the 36th vice president and one of the youngest at 41. He oversaw desegregation of the military, which was already going into effect, the Marshall Plan, which was already going into effect, and keeping his campaign promise to keep the New Deal just as it is. But he also ended up failing to accomplish saving the nationalists in China, leading to communist domination of China. But Dewey fully supported the crackdown of communist forces in America, created a bunch of agencies, and funded greatly the Department of Un-American Activities. 1950, Dewey introduces the National Highway System to help unite America as well as bringing people from the big cities to the more rural areas, which inadvertently also caused America to be very carb-centric. And to keep conservatives and the Republican Party on board, he ignored the separation of church and state and changed the U.S. motto into In God We Trust, and make every kid take a Pledge of Allegiance that specifically stated God in it. And to make up for the mistake of China, he entered into the Korean War. It was going pretty bad, but with the support of Douglas MacArthur, they were able to swing around at Incheon and lead to Southern victory. Well, for a bit. It kind of went back and forth. 1951, Republicans passed the 22nd Amendment, making sure that there can never be a third-term president, FDR. Meanwhile, in Belgium, they were having a big discussion, should they keep the monarchy? Even with King Leopold III resigning for his son Baldwin I, a lot of people weren't excited, which led to the Belgian Civil War, with communist French Belgian Wallonians trying to secede. Under Lucie Desjardins, well, just in time, MacArthur already settled a white peace in Korea. So American troops were sent over to his rival Ike Eisenhower, the commander of NATO. Even the Grand Duchy of Luxembourg entered into the war on the Allies' side. During this time, also, the Belgian Congo declared independence, becoming the first African state to do so. The king really did not like this and wanted Belgium to keep the Congo, but Dewey refused to help in this colonial war. Then, ironically, after a British officer dies, he ended up joining the British in a colonial war in Malaysia. 1952, and the Belgian War was pretty quick. Luxembourg really wanted to take the German-speaking parts of Belgium, but they were denied. In an interview when Dewey was asked why did the war go so quickly, and Dewey replied jokingly saying that Americans hated Brussels sprouts. But the mic cut off when he said sprouts, so it sounded like he said America hates Brussels.
Belgian Americans in LA's Little Antwerp, numbering in the double digits, are striking back against anti-Belgianism.
Now, with the Belgium scandal, the stagnating economy, the slow racial integration, the China thing, Dewey was not really doing super hot, even after trying to shave and looking like Robert Downey Jr. Nobody really liked him anymore, and he lost the Republican nomination to General in World War II and Korean War hero Douglas MacArthur, selecting Richard Nixon, the senator from California, as his running mate. Ike Eisenhower saw this and said, "Hell no!" and he made it back to America. Since the last election, both parties were really trying to draft him to be their presidential pick, and the Democrats finally got him. While being a little more on the conservative side, he also really wanted to expand the social welfare and New Deal programs, and eventually he'll get famous for sending the military to forcibly desegregate in the South. He made a deal with Harry Truman to be his running mate to compete with MacArthur. He was able to even swing over a lot of people who voted for Dewey in '48, leading to a pretty seismic victory. Ike Eisenhower became the 35th president, and Harry Truman became the only person in history to become vice president, then president. He lost an election, and now he's vice president again, and he'll be acting president a few times throughout Ike's term. A lot of people attacked Ike at the time for being America's first atheist president because he was never baptized and was never really that religious of a person. Most historians argue against this, and Ike definitely wouldn't have seen himself like that. 1953, George VI passes away and gets succeeded by his brother Henry IX instead of his daughter Elizabeth. But she'll have the last laugh. 1954, Ike Eisenhower officially ends the House of Un-American Activities. Meanwhile, Marcus Garvey becomes the first Prime Minister of Sierra Leone the same year as Ghana achieved independence, and together they formed the Economic Community of West Africa. 1955, the President of Argentina survives an attempted coup d'etat and continued to be president until his death in the 70s. 1956, Mobutu coups the government of the Congo and declares its new name of Zaire. It'll keep that name and he'll still be president till the late 90s. 1957, Brunei joins Northern Borneo and becomes the 10th kingdom in Malaysia. 1958, De Willers Graaf very narrowly won election in South Africa. So narrow, in fact, he only was able to pass very minor reform, including keeping them within the British realm till the late 70s. 1959. With the US economy booming from taxing the rich, and despite this popularity for Ike, Truman decided not to run for a non-consecutive second term, leading to the Democrats nominating Lyndon Baines Johnson, a senator from Texas. And to balance the ticket, he chose his running mate, the young and handsome John F. Kennedy. So the election next year against MacArthur's former running mate Richard Nixon and the anti-civil rights Dixiecrats, LBJ easily won. In 1961, he inherited the failed invasion of Cuba at the Bay of Pigs, so to make up for it, he ramped up the war in Vietnam. While at home, he made the Second New Deal, the Great Society, greatly benefiting humanity, big supporter of civil rights, and started the space program, and was able to get all of it through from light intimidation, and won a landslide re-election, forever changing American politics. But people still hated the Vietnam War. 1966, in Australia, the opposition Labour Party leader Arthur Caldwell is assassinated, leading to Gough Whitlam taking control, but he very narrowly loses the election to the incumbent Liberal Party led by Harold Holt. In 1967, he had a very lovely holiday going swimming. In America, Eugene McCarthy ends up winning the Democratic nomination over JFK on a hard anti-war campaign. Channing E. Phillips becomes the first African-American running mate in American history. Nixon was trying yet again to get elected, and he really did not like the whole anti-war movement, but he also knew they were popular, so he campaigned with them, blaming the Democrats for the Vietnam War. And in 1968, third time was a charm because Richard Nixon is elected president, ending nearly 36 years of Democratic rule with Dewey being a little break. Just in time to see the moon landing. And Nixon kept his promises and immediately pulled out of Vietnam kind of quickly and ended up losing the South pretty fast afterwards. Third time was also the charm for Gough Whitlam in Australia, being elected the next prime minister. Soviet Premier Leonid Brezhnev gets assassinated and replaced by Yuri Andropov. It's finally the 1970s. Stuff is very vibrant and colorful while also being horribly brown. Now an insane journalist, Hunter S. Thompson, gets elected mayor of Aspen. He resigned a day later, not trusting a system that would have elected him. Alexei Leonev becomes the first Soviet to walk the moon, along with Turkish Andriy Nikolaev being the first two non-Americans to moonwalk, which in 1971 fired up Nixon to refund NASA, and after a few failed attempts, they made it back to the moon. As the British make it into space, father of Julian McMahon, William McMahon beats Harold Holt in a confidence vote, becoming the next Prime Minister of Australia. 1972. It was discovered that Nixon was spying on his enemies, so Richard Nixon and Spiro Agnew declined to run for re-election. So Richard Nixon and Spiro Agnew declined to run for re-election, but also denied any involvement and denied it existed and refused to give up evidence even after a few court orders and said the whole system was rigged and blah blah blah, leave me alone, the president can do what they want, even though the court said they couldn't. But thanks to a poor showing by the Democrats, Republicans ended up winning the election anyway, with Gerald Ford and Nelson Rockefeller. 1973, and to get the public's mind off of Watergate, President Ford entered the Rhodesian Bush War, sending aid to the white Rhodesians against the native blacks who were being funded by China. The 4-year involvement cost America 3,329 lives. 1974, in a very close election, the Greeks decided to keep their monarch, Constantine II, ended military rule and elected a different person named Constantine as the prime minister, and reduced the monarch's powers. And speaking of monarchy, King Henry IX of the UK passes away, but there were some problems because his eldest son William passed away 2 years earlier from a hot balloon accident, and his other son Richard, even worse, married a commodore. So the throne passed to Henry's niece, Elizabeth II, who was married to a Greek nobleman. Right before a meeting, Gerald Ford is shot by a former member of the Manson family, but he didn't become the first president to be assassinated since William McKinley because he ended up surviving but fell into a coma until 1979. So Nelson Rockefeller, the vice president, had to become the acting president, with the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development becoming the acting vice president, George W. Romney. Technically becoming the first Mormon vice president, but only acting. 1975, the dictator of Portugal attempts to escape to Brazil but gets captured and executed. Acting President Nelson Rockefeller refuses to be sworn in as the actual president and also wants to retire and doesn't want to seek a second term. And South Africa officially breaks from the British monarchy. 1976, the British land a Welshman on the moon. The Supreme Court upholds the ban on the death penalty. There's a lot of concern of George Romney trying to run for president because there's concern of him being Mormon and also being born in Mexico, which led to him having a third-place victory in the Republican National Convention, first place going to Ronald Reagan, the governor of California and a former actor, who selected Bob Dole, a senator from Kansas, as his running mate. But the Democrats were energized by a former peanut farmer, political outsider, and young Georgia governor, Jimmy Carter. So it became a campaign of tradition and stability versus optimism and something different. And very narrowly, Jimmy Carter squeezed out. 1977, and a new space craze was all the rage. Japan landed on the moon. NASA launched the U.S. Enterprise after a few delays, and released alongside it after 8 years. Star Trek was revived for a 4th season. The season received mixed to negative reviews, with fans not enjoying the new designs and the new psychedelic effects, but it didn't stop the studio from combining the first 4 episodes into Star Trek The Motion Picture. The Labour Party finally wins in Ireland under Michael O'Leary for only 1 term. Well, Spain elected their socialist candidate, and he'll serve for the next 20 years. 1978, Roman Polanski is caught trying to escape America, so he's sentenced to 50 years already, plus 15 for attempting to escape. Greece wins Eurovision with their song Charlie Chaplin, which was relevant at the time because people stole the body of Charlie Chaplin. 1979, Sid Vicious's prison sentence is reduced and he's sent to a mental facility. Many claim that he died there because we haven't seen him since 2008. The 3 Mile Island nuclear power plant nearly goes into meltdown if it wasn't for the quick actions of the safety inspector, Homer J. Stankiewicz, who eventually would receive a Presidential Medal of Freedom, and a second one for eventually inspiring another character named Homer, who also was a nuclear safety inspector, who has a son named Bartholomew and a daughter named Margaret. Jimmy Carter went fishing and caught a rabbit. That was huge for publicity for his re-election. While Reagan was trying his second time for presidency, this time he selected the former child star and ambassador to Ghana, Shirley Temple Black, who became the first female running mate of a major party in American history. Jimmy was popular, but being an outsider, he didn't really have a lot of friends around Congress, and the economy was starting to stagnate, and eventually would go down because Iran started having a revolution. But find out about that in a video next time. Make sure to hit like and subscribe for that.